Commander Sarah Chun had always believed that humanity's greatest strength lay not in their advanced technology or superior firepower, but in their stubborn refusal to accept defeat. As she stood in the observation deck of the UES Defiance, watching the massive alien fleet approach through the viewport, that belief was about to be tested like never before. The Zephyrian Armada stretched across space like a constellation of death. Their ships were organic in design, flowing curves that seemed to pulse with bioluminescent energy. Each vessel was easily 10 times the size of Earth's largest dreadnoughts, and there were hundreds of them. Sarah's tactical display showed red indicators wherever she looked. The numbers were overwhelming, impossible, and yet here they were. "Ma'am, incoming transmission on all frequencies," reported Lieutenant Rodriguez from the communications station. His voice carried the barely controlled tension that had gripped the entire bridge crew for the past 3 days. "Put it through, Lieutenant." The main screen flickered, and suddenly, the bridge was filled with an alien presence. The Zephyrian Queen was unlike anything in the xenobiology textbooks. She stood nearly 8 feet tall, her form humanoid but elongated, with skin that shifted between deep purple and silver like liquid mercury. Her eyes were large and completely black, reflecting the bridge lights like obsidian mirrors. What struck Sarah most was not the alien's imposing presence, but the intelligence that seemed to radiate from those dark eyes. "I am Queen Valorath of the Zephyrian Dominion," the alien spoke, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in Sarah's bones. The universal translator struggled with the complex tones, creating an almost musical quality to her words. "You are the human commander of this vessel." Sarah stepped forward, her boots clicking against the metal deck plating. Every eye on the bridge was on her, waiting to see how humanity's representative would handle first contact with a species that had just demonstrated the ability to destroy their entire solar system. "I am Commander Sarah Chun of the United Earth Fleet. I speak for humanity in this sector." Queen Valorath tilted her head, a gesture that was almost familiar despite coming from a being that had evolved on a world 3,000 light-years away. "Curious. Your species sends a single representative to speak for billions? This suggests either tremendous trust or tremendous foolishness." "Perhaps both," Sarah replied, surprising herself with the honesty. "But that's how we operate. One voice, one decision, one chance to get it right." The alien queen was silent for a long moment, those black eyes seeming to study every detail of Sarah's face. Around the bridge, her crew waited with the kind of stillness that comes before either celebration or catastrophe. "Your species has been observed, Commander Chen. For 3 of your solar rotations, we have watched your expansion into this region of space. We have seen your colonies, studied your technology, monitored your communications. You are unique among the species we have encountered." Sarah felt her heart rate spike, but kept her voice steady. "Unique how? You fight wars not to conquer, but to protect. You explore not to claim territory, but to understand. You sacrifice individuals for the survival of many, yet you mourn each loss as if you had lost a family member. This is not the behavior we expected from a species that has achieved interstellar travel." The queen began to pace, her movements fluid and predatory. Behind her, Sarah could see glimpses of what appeared to be a massive throne room carved from some kind of living crystal. Other Zephyrians moved in the background, their forms similar to their queen but smaller, less imposing. "Most species we encounter follow predictable patterns," Valorath continued. "They develop technology, they expand aggressively, they encounter other species and either destroy them or are destroyed in turn. It is the way of the universe. Natural selection on a galactic scale. And you're the ones doing the selecting?" Sarah asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. "We are survivors, Commander. The Zephyrian Dominion has existed for over 50,000 of your years. We have seen civilizations rise and fall like waves against the shore. Some we have guided, others we have redirected. A few we have been forced to eliminate entirely." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Sarah was acutely aware of her crew listening to every word, knowing that their families, their entire species, might depend on the next few minutes of conversation. "Which category do humans fall into?" she asked. Queen Valorath stopped pacing and turned to face the screen directly. "That is what I intend to discover. Your species presents us with a puzzle, Commander Chen. In our observations, you have demonstrated both remarkable compassion and terrible destructive capability. You care for your weak and elderly, yet you have developed weapons that could sterilize entire worlds. You create art and music that transcends species barriers, yet you wage wars with a ferocity that impresses even us." Sarah thought of Earth, of the blue marble floating in space 3 months' journey away. She thought of her sister's children, who would be starting their second year of school right about now. She thought of the colonies scattered across a dozen star systems, each one representing humanity's hopes and dreams made manifest in metal and polymer. "We're complicated," she said finally, "but I think that's true of any species worth preserving." Preserving. The Queen seemed to taste the word. An interesting choice of terminology. "Tell me, Commander, what makes humanity worthy of preservation?" It was the question Sarah had been dreading since the alien fleet first appeared on her sensors. How do you justify the existence of an entire species in a few sentences? How do you convince a being with the power to wipe out billions that those billions deserve to live? "We learn," Sarah said. "We grow. We change. Every mistake teaches us something new. Every challenge makes us stronger. We're not perfect, Queen Valorath, but we're trying to be better than we were yesterday." Growth, change, improvement. The alien queen nodded slowly. "These are qualities we value, but there are also qualities claimed by many species that ultimately prove to be disappointments. Words are easily spoken, Commander Chun. Actions reveal truth." The screen flickered for a moment, and when it cleared, the background had changed. Instead of the throne room, Sarah could see what appeared to be a star map, with hundreds of systems marked in different colors. Some pulsed with green light, others with red, and a disturbing number were marked with what could only be indicators of dead systems. "Each point of light represents a species we have evaluated," Queen Valorath explained. "Green indicates those we have accepted into the greater galactic community. Red indicates those we have chosen to guide from a distance. The dark markers." She paused meaningfully. "Those represent species that proved incompatible with continued existence." Sarah's blood ran cold as she realized the scale of what she was looking at. Hundreds of civilizations, and far too many of them marked for extinction. "What determines which category a species falls into?" she asked. "A test," the Queen replied simply. "Each species is given an opportunity to demonstrate their true nature. Some tests are complex, involving multiple scenarios played out over decades. Others are simpler, requiring only a single decision that reveals the core of what a species truly values." "And what's our test?" Queen Valorath smiled, an expression that was somehow both beautiful and terrifying on her alien features. "You are about to find out. In 3 of your hours, my fleet will begin an assault on your colony world of New Marseille. The planet contains approximately 2 million of your people, including a significant number of children and elderly individuals." Sarah's hands clenched into fists at her sides. New Marseille was one of humanity's newest colonies, barely 50 years old. It was a peaceful world focused on agricultural development and scientific research. The thought of those innocent people facing the firepower she'd witnessed from the Zephyrian fleet made her stomach turn. However, the Queen continued, "We offer you an alternative. Surrender yourself and your ship to us immediately. Submit to our authority and acknowledge the Zephyrian Dominion's sovereignty over this region of space. Do this, and the colony will be spared. And if we surrender, what happens to humanity? You will become a client species of the Dominion. Your expansion will be limited to systems we designate as appropriate. Your technology will be monitored and controlled. Your population growth will be managed according to our specifications. You will exist, but only within the boundaries we set. Sarah felt her crew's eyes on her, waiting for her response. She thought of the oath she'd taken when she accepted command of the Defiance, to protect Earth and its colonies, to preserve human freedom and dignity, to never surrender while there was still hope of victory. But what was victory against odds like these? The Zephyrian fleet could destroy her ship and still have enough firepower left to glass every human world from here to the Sol system. You're asking me to choose between freedom and survival, she said. I'm asking you to choose what matters most to your species, Queen Valarath replied. This is the nature of our test, Commander Chun. Will humanity fight for principles even when facing certain death? Or will you accept survival at the cost of those principles? Both choices have merit, but they reveal very different truths about what your species truly values. Sarah turned away from the screen for a moment, looking out at the stars beyond the viewport. Somewhere out there, 2 million humans were going about their daily lives, unaware that their fate was being decided by a conversation between their representative and an alien queen. Children were playing. Farmers were tending crops that would feed their communities. Scientists were making discoveries that would benefit all of humanity. Those people deserve a chance to live, but they also deserve to live free. I need time to consider this, Sarah said, turning back to face the queen. Time is a luxury your species can ill afford, Valarath replied. But I am not unreasonable. You have 2 of your hours to decide. Use them wisely, Commander Chun. The choice you make will echo through the centuries, one way or another. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in absolute silence. Sarah could hear the subtle hum of the ship's systems, the quiet breathing of her crew, the distant vibration of the engines that had carried them so far from home. Mom. Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice was barely above a whisper. Your orders? Sarah looked around the bridge at the faces of her crew. These people had followed her across the galaxy, trusted her with their lives, and the lives of everyone they'd left behind. Now, she was being asked to make a choice that would define not just their fate, but the fate of humanity itself. Rodriguez, get me a secure channel to Earth Command. Peterson, I want a full tactical analysis of the Zephyrian fleet. Martinez, start working on contingency plans for an evacuation of New Marseille. And Thompson, she paused, looking at her science officer. I want you to analyze everything we've learned about the Zephyrians. Their technology, their behavior patterns, anything that might give us an edge. Ma'am, with respect, Peterson said carefully, the tactical situation is pretty clear. They outnumber us 500 to 1, and each of their ships outguns our entire fleet. I know the odds, Lieutenant, Sarah replied, but we're not just fighting for military victory here. We're fighting for something more important than that. She moved to her command chair and settled into it, feeling the weight of command like never before. Through the viewport, the Zephyrian fleet hung in space like a promise of destruction. But Sarah had not come this far, had not dedicated her life to protecting humanity's future, only to surrender when that future was threatened. Humanity has faced impossible odds before, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the bridge. We've survived ice ages and plagues, wars, and disasters that should have wiped us out completely. We're still here because when faced with extinction, we don't just fight for survival. We fight for the right to determine our own destiny. The crew began moving with renewed purpose, each officer focused on their assigned tasks. Sarah watched them work and felt a surge of pride. These people represented the best of humanity. Their courage, their dedication, their refusal to accept defeat even when facing overwhelming odds. But courage alone wouldn't be enough to save 2 million lives. Sarah needed a plan, and she needed it in less than 2 hours. As her crew worked frantically around her, Sarah stared out at the alien fleet and began to formulate an idea. It was dangerous, probably suicidal, and definitely insane. But it might just be crazy enough to work. After all, humans had always been good at doing the impossible when the stakes were high enough. and the stakes had never been higher than this. The clock was ticking, and with each passing second, humanity moved closer to a crossroads that would determine whether they would survive as a free species or exist only as subjects of an alien empire. Sarah Chun had 2 hours to find a third option. The next 90 minutes aboard the UES Defiance moved with the desperate efficiency of a countdown to doomsday. Sarah paced the bridge as reports flooded in from every department. The secure transmission to Earth Command had gone through, though the response wouldn't arrive for another 18 hours due to the vast distances involved. For now, humanity's fate rested entirely in her hands. "Commander," Science Officer Thompson called out, his voice tight with concentration. "I found something interesting in the Zephyrian communication patterns. The Queen's ship is emitting a very specific type of quantum entanglement signature. It's unlike anything I've seen before." Sarah moved to his station, studying the complex waveforms dancing across his display. "What does it mean?" "I think they're using quantum-linked consciousness networks. The entire fleet might be operating as a single entity, with the Queen as the central processing node. It would explain their perfect coordination and the way they seem to anticipate each other's movements." "Are you saying they're a hive mind?" Thompson shook his head. "Not exactly. More like a distributed intelligence. Each ship maintains individual consciousness, but they can share information instantaneously across any distance. It's actually quite brilliant. Can we disrupt it?" "Theoretically, yes. But we need to generate a massive quantum interference field and the power requirements." Thompson paused, running calculations on his secondary display. "We'd have to overload our entire reactor core. It would be a one-shot deal, and there's no guarantee it would work." Sarah nodded grimly. One piece of the puzzle, but not nearly enough. She turned to her tactical officer. "Peterson, what's the status on the evacuation plans?" Lieutenant Peterson looked up from his console, sweat beading on his forehead despite the bridge's controlled environment. "It's not good, ma'am. New Marseille has limited transport capability. We could maybe evacuate 10% of the population in the time we have left, and that's assuming the Zephyrians don't interfere. What about using our ship? The Defiance could take maybe 3,000 people if we pack them in like cargo. But that still leaves over 97% of the colony defenseless." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 2 million lives pressing down on her shoulders. Every choice seemed to lead to the same inevitable conclusion: massive loss of human life. "Ma'am," Rodriguez called from communications. "I'm picking up internal chatter from the Zephyrian fleet. The universal translator is having trouble with some of the concepts, but it sounds like they're debating something. Put it through the speakers, filtered for anything we can understand." The bridge filled with the alien voices, their harmonic tones creating an almost musical backdrop to the fragments of translated conversation. Unusual response patterns. Never seen such determination in the face of. Probability calculations suggest they will choose differently than previous species. Queen Valorath believes this one may be worth preserving, but the test must be completed. Fascinating neural architecture. Their capacity for self-sacrifice appears to be genetic rather than cultural. Sarah listened intently, filing away every piece of information. The Zephyrians were talking about humans like specimens in a laboratory, but there was something else in their tone. Respect? Curiosity? Hope? "Commander," Martinez spoke up from the navigation station. "I've been running trajectory calculations for a possible assault on the Zephyrian command ship. If we could get close enough to the Queen's vessel." "You're talking about a suicide run," Peterson interrupted. "Their point defense systems would turn us into scrap metal before we got within 1,000 kilometers. "Maybe," Martinez admitted. "But what if we didn't try to survive it? What if we just focused on getting through their defenses long enough to deliver a message?" Sarah frowned. "What kind of message?" Martinez turned to face her, his eyes bright with the kind of desperate inspiration that came from staring death in the face. "What if we show them what humanity is really about? Not through words, but through actions. What if we make a gesture so completely human that it forces them to reconsider their evaluation?" I'm listening. The quantum interference field Thompson mentioned. We overload our reactor, generate a massive disruption that temporarily breaks their fleet coordination. But instead of using that moment to attack them, we use it to do something else entirely. Sarah studied her navigation officer's face, seeing the pieces of a plan forming in his mind. Such as, we transmit every piece of human art, literature, music, and scientific knowledge in our databases directly to their ships. All of it. The complete record of human achievement, broadcast on every frequency we can generate. We show them who we really are. Thompson looked up from his calculations. That's actually brilliant. The quantum disruption would force their ships to rely on individual processing power instead of their collective network. They'd be temporarily isolated, unable to filter out our transmission using their standard protocols. But it would still be a suicide run, Peterson pointed out. The reactor overload would destroy our ship. And save New Marseille, Sarah said quietly. The plan was taking shape in her mind, and despite its fatal flaw, she could see the logic in it. The Queen said this was a test to reveal what humanity truly values. What if we show her that we value the preservation of knowledge and culture above our own lives? Rodriguez nodded slowly. It's the kind of gesture that might actually make them pause and reconsider, even if we don't survive it. Sarah looked around the bridge at her crew. These people were prepared to die for their principles, just like humans had done countless times throughout history. But was that really the answer Queen Valarath was looking for? There's one problem with this plan, Sarah said. It assumes the Queen is looking for a specific type of response. What if she's not? What if this really is just about power and submission? Then we die knowing we stayed true to ourselves, Martinez replied simply. Sarah was about to respond when alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The main display flickered to life, showing long-range sensors detecting movement in the Zephyrian fleet. Ma'am, they're beginning their approach to New Marseille, Rodriguez reported, his voice tight with tension. Estimated time to weapons range, 47 minutes. The moment of decision had arrived ahead of schedule. Sarah looked at her crew one last time, then activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is the commander. In less than an hour, the Zephyrian fleet will reach New Marseille. We have been given a choice: surrender and accept alien domination, or fight and watch millions of innocent people die. But I believe there's a third option. Sarah paused, gathering her thoughts. Throughout the ship, she knew that every member of her crew was listening, waiting to hear how their captain planned to save both human lives and human dignity. We're going to do something that no other species has probably ever attempted. We're going to give the Zephyrians a gift. Not tribute, not submission, but a genuine offering that represents the best of what humanity has achieved. And we're going to deliver it personally. She switched to the direct bridge communication channel. Thompson, begin uploading our entire cultural database to the main transmitter array. Martinez, plot a course that brings us as close as possible to the Queen's ship. Peterson, prepare for reactor overload on my command. Rodriguez, open a channel to Queen Valarath. The screen flickered, and once again the alien Queen's imposing presence filled the bridge. This time, however, Sarah thought she detected something different in those black eyes. Anticipation, perhaps. Or maybe it was just her imagination. Commander Chun, Queen Valarath said, her harmonic voice carrying across the bridge. Your time has nearly expired. Have you reached a decision? I have, Sarah replied, stepping forward so that she was centered in the transmission field. But first, I have a question for you, Your Majesty. In all your years of evaluating species, has any of them ever surprised you? The alien Queen tilted her head, that almost familiar gesture that somehow made her seem more relatable despite her otherworldly appearance. Surprise is rare among established patterns of behavior. Why do you ask? Because humanity specializes in the unexpected, Sarah said. We don't fit your categories, Queen Valarath. We're not aggressive expansionists, but we're not passive either. We don't seek to dominate other species, but We won't accept domination ourselves. We create beauty in the midst of chaos and find hope in the darkest circumstances. Pretty words, Commander, but your time is— Let me finish, Sarah interrupted, surprised by her own boldness. You want to see what humanity truly values? You want to understand what makes us different from every other species you've encountered? Then, watch what we do next. Sarah nodded to her crew, and the carefully orchestrated plan began to unfold. The Defiance's engines roared to life, pushing the ship toward the alien fleet at maximum acceleration. At the same time, Thompson began the complex process of overloading the reactor core, building up the massive energy charge needed for the quantum interference field. Commander Chun, what are you doing? Queen Valorath's voice carried a note of genuine curiosity rather than alarm. We're coming to visit you, Sarah replied calmly. And we're bringing gifts. The main display split, showing both the alien queen and the tactical situation as the Defiance raced toward the Zephyrian command ship. The enemy fleet was reacting to their approach, weapons systems powering up, and defensive formations shifting to intercept. Ma'am, they're targeting us, Peterson reported. Energy weapons charging across their entire forward line. Hold course, Sarah ordered. She turned back to the screen, locking eyes with the alien queen. Your Majesty, what you're about to witness is uniquely human. We call a leap of faith. Your ship will be destroyed, Valorath said matter-of-factly. This gesture accomplishes nothing except the deaths of you and your crew. Does it? Sarah asked. But does it show you something about humanity that you haven't seen before? We're not charging your fleet to attack you, Queen Valorath. We're coming to give you a gift that represents 50,000 years of human civilization. Art, music, literature, scientific discoveries, philosophical insights, everything that makes us who we are. And you will die in the process. Some things are worth dying for, Sarah replied simply. The continuation of human culture is one of them. The right to choose our own destiny is another. And the belief that understanding between species is possible, even when that understanding comes at a terrible cost. The Zephyrian weapons were reaching full charge, their alien energies creating visible distortions in space. Sarah could see death approaching at the speed of light, but she felt no fear, only a strange sense of completion, as if this moment had been inevitable from the very beginning. Ma'am, 10 seconds to weapons range, Peterson announced. Thompson, status on the cultural upload? Ready to transmit, Commander. All of human knowledge, compressed and packaged for maximum impact. When the interference field hits their ships, every Zephyrian in the fleet will experience what it means to be human. Do it. The reactor core reached critical overload just as the first alien weapons fired. Space erupted in brilliant light as competing energies tore at the fabric of reality itself. The quantum interference field expanded outward from the Defiance like a wave of pure possibility, washing over the Zephyrian fleet and temporarily severing their collective consciousness network. In that moment of disconnection, every alien ship received the full transmission of human culture. Art and music flooded their systems, carried by the quantum field directly into their organic computers. They experienced Mozart's symphonies and Hendrix's guitar solos, saw Van Gogh's paintings and Hubble telescope images, felt the emotional impact of poetry written in languages they had never encountered. But it was more than just data. The transmission carried something deeper, the context and emotion behind human creativity. The Zephyrians experienced what it felt like to stand beneath a starry sky and wonder about their place in the universe. They felt the joy of scientific discovery, the pain of loss, the hope of love, the determination to create something beautiful in a universe that often seemed harsh and uncaring. For 37 seconds, the most advanced alien civilization in the galaxy experienced what it meant to be human. And in those 37 seconds, everything changed. The Defiance was dying, her hull buckled, and systems failing as alien weapons tore through her defenses. But Sarah remained standing on a bridge, watching the alien fleet as ship after ship ceased firing. The perfect coordination that had made them so terrifying was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like confusion. "Ma'am," Rodriguez called out through the chaos of failing systems, "I'm receiving transmissions from multiple Zephyrian ships. They're asking us to identify specific pieces of music they just experienced." Sarah smiled, even as emergency lighting bathed the bridge in red. "Patch them through." The main screen flickered with interference, but she could make out dozens of alien faces, all of them staring at her with expressions she had never seen on non-human features before. Wonder, curiosity, something that might have been awe. "Commander Chun." Queen Valorath's voice cut through the chaos, her harmonics somehow reaching the bridge despite their failing communication systems. "What have you done to my fleet?" "I've shown them who we are," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the fact that her ship was breaking apart around her. Not through conquest or submission, but through the simple act of sharing what makes us human. "Is that not what your test was designed to reveal?" The alien queen was silent for a long moment, her black eyes reflecting emotions that Sarah couldn't begin to interpret. Around her, the bridge crew continued their duties even as the ship died beneath them, their faces calm and determined in the face of approaching death. "My fleet," Queen Valorath said finally, "they are experiencing sensations they have never known. Emotions without purpose, beauty without function, hope without logical foundation. What you have shared with them, it is unlike anything we have encountered in 50,000 years of galactic exploration." "Then you understand," Sarah said. "This is what humanity brings to the universe. Not conquest, not submission, but the possibility of something new. Something that transcends the simple patterns of survival and dominance." The ship shuddered as another system failed, but Sarah remained focused on the alien queen's face. In those black eyes, she thought she could see the moment when everything changed, when the test became something neither human nor Zephyrian had expected. "Commander Chun," Queen Valorath said, her voice carrying new harmonics that the translator struggled to interpret. "Your ship is dying. I know. Your gesture has been noted. The test is complete." Sarah felt her knees give out as the bridge's artificial gravity fluctuated. She gripped her command chair for support, determined to face whatever came next with the same dignity her crew had shown. "And the verdict?" she asked. Queen Valorath's expression was impossible to read, but when she spoke, there was something new in her voice, something that might have been respect. "Humanity has passed the first phase of evaluation," she said. "The question now is whether you are prepared for what comes next." Sarah awoke to the sensation of breathing water, her lungs filled with liquid that somehow provided oxygen more efficiently than air, and her body felt weightless despite being fully conscious. She was floating in what appeared to be a healing pod made from the same organic crystal she had seen in the Queen's throne room, suspended in a translucent blue fluid that pulsed with gentle bioluminescence. The last thing she remembered was the bridge of the Defiance disintegrating around her as the ship's reactor finally gave out completely. She had been certain that death was moments away. Instead, she found herself very much alive and apparently uninjured. "You are experiencing our regeneration matrix," a familiar harmonic voice said. Sarah turned her head to see Queen Valorath standing beside the pod, her mercury-colored skin reflecting the chamber's soft lighting. "Your injuries were extensive, but not beyond our ability to repair." Sarah tried to speak, but only bubbles emerged. The Queen seemed to understand her confusion and gestured to a control surface that materialized from the pod's organic walls. The fluid began to drain, and soon Sarah was breathing air again. "My crew," she gasped as the pod opened with a sound like singing crystal. "Are they alive?" Queen Valorath confirmed. "All 23 members of your crew survived the destruction of your vessel. They are recovering in chambers similar to yours." Sarah sat up carefully, surprised to find that she was wearing clothes made from some kind of adaptive fabric that felt like silk but moved like liquid metal. Her body felt stronger than it had in years, as if the alien healing process had repaired damage she hadn't even known she was carrying. "Why?" she asked simply. Queen Valorath moved to a viewing portal that showed the stars beyond. "Because your test revealed something unprecedented, Commander Chun. In 50,000 years of galactic evaluation, no species has ever chosen to sacrifice themselves for the sake of sharing rather than conquest." The chamber they were in was clearly part of a ship, but unlike any vessel Sarah had ever seen. The walls curved organically, as if grown rather than built, and they seemed to pulse with their own life. Bioluminescent patterns flowed through the structure like neural pathways, creating a sense that the ship itself was thinking. "Come," the Queen said. "There is much you need to understand before we proceed." They walked through corridors that adjusted themselves to accommodate their passage, the ship's living architecture responding to their presence. Sarah saw other Zephyrians moving through the vessel, each one pausing to study her with those deep black eyes. She noticed that they seemed different now, less perfectly coordinated, more individual in their movements and expressions. "Your quantum disruption," Queen Valorath explained as they walked, "temporarily severed our collective consciousness network. For the first time in millennia, my people experienced true individual thought without the background presence of the greater mind." "I'm sorry if we caused—" "Do not apologize," the Queen interrupted. "It was illuminating. Many of my people are requesting that the disconnection be made permanent for periods of personal reflection. This is unprecedented in our history." They entered a vast chamber that seemed to extend in all directions, its walls displaying a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Thousands of star systems were marked with the same color-coding system Sarah had seen before, but now she noticed new categories, systems marked with shifting patterns that seemed to indicate something between the simple green, red, and dark classifications. "This is the Hall of Evaluation," Queen Valorath said. "Every species we have encountered is recorded here, along with the results of their testing." Sarah studied the display, overwhelmed by the scope of what she was seeing. "How many species have you tested?" 7,432, the Queen replied without hesitation. "Of those, approximately 30% have been accepted into the galactic community with full autonomy. Another 40% have been granted conditional existence under our guidance. The remainder," she gestured to the dark markers, "they chose paths that led to their extinction. And where do humans fit into this?" Queen Valorath manipulated the display, and the view zoomed in on a section showing human-controlled space. Sarah's breath caught as she saw that their systems were marked not with any of the standard colors, but with something new, a swirling pattern of gold and silver that seemed to shift and change as she watched. "You're the first species to create a new category," the Queen said. "Your actions have forced us to reconsider our fundamental assumptions about intelligent life." Sarah studied the display more carefully and noticed something troubling. Those systems marked in red, the ones under your guidance. Some of them show significant technological advancement, but their expansion has been completely halted. What happened to their exploration programs? Their cultural development? They were provided with everything they needed for comfortable existence within the boundaries we established. There was no need for further expansion or risk. "But that's not really living," Sarah protested. "That's just existing." Those species gave up everything that makes exploration and growth meaningful in exchange for safety. Queen Valorath's expression was unreadable. They chose survival over uncertainty. Most species, when faced with forces beyond their control, make the pragmatic choice. What about the green ones? The species granted full autonomy. Those are rare. Perhaps one in every few hundred species demonstrates the qualities necessary for true independence. They are integrated into the greater galactic community as equals. The Queen manipulated the display again, showing Sarah what appeared to be a thriving interstellar civilization. Ships moved between systems in complex patterns, and the technological indicators showed advancement far beyond anything humanity had achieved. The Kithara achieved this status approximately 8,000 years ago, Queen Valorath explained. They demonstrated courage, wisdom, and the ability to consider consequences beyond their immediate survival. They are now valued members of the Galactic Council. Could humanity achieve something similar? That depends on the results of your second test. Sarah felt her stomach clench. Second test? I thought we had passed. You passed the evaluation of character, the Queen clarified. You demonstrated that humanity values knowledge, culture, and sacrifice for abstract principles. But character alone is insufficient for true independence. You must also demonstrate wisdom. The display shifted again, showing a section of space that Sarah didn't recognize. Multiple star systems were highlighted, each one showing signs of intelligent life. In this region, Queen Valorath continued, there exists a collection of younger species. Some are barely spacefaring. Others have achieved interstellar travel, but remain confined to their local systems. All of them are approaching the same crossroads that humanity has just navigated. Sarah began to understand. You want us to evaluate them. More than evaluate. You will be given the authority to guide their development according to your own judgment. Some may require gentle encouragement. Others may pose threats that need to be contained. A few might prove worthy of advancement to full independence. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. You're asking us to become like you, to become the judges of other species' worth. I'm offering humanity the opportunity to shape the galaxy's future, Queen Valorath replied. The Kithara have performed this function in their region of space for millennia. They have guided 17 species to independence and prevented dozens of wars that would have cost billions of lives. Sarah stared at the display, watching the complex dance of civilizations across the galaxy. The power being offered was staggering, the ability to determine the fate of entire species. But it was also a responsibility that seemed almost too large for any one civilization to bear. What if we refuse? She asked. Then, humanity will be classified as worthy of independence within your current territory, but you will not be granted expansion rights beyond the systems you currently occupy. You will exist, you will thrive within those boundaries, but you will play no role in the galaxy's broader development. A comfortable cage. A secure existence, the Queen corrected. Many species would consider it an ideal outcome. Sarah walked closer to the display, studying the younger civilizations that humanity would be responsible for evaluating. Some showed signs of aggressive expansion, while others seemed focused on internal development. A few displayed the kind of artistic achievement that had impressed the Zephyrians about humanity. How long do we have to decide? The decision must be made now, Commander Chun. Your people are already being briefed on the choice they face. Within the next few hours, representatives from Earth will need to make a choice that will determine humanity's role in the galaxy. I'm just one person, Sarah protested. I can't make this decision for my entire species. You can make it for yourself, Queen Valorath replied. And your choice will influence how your people respond to this opportunity. The chamber fell silent, except for the soft harmonics of the ship's living systems. Sarah found herself thinking about humanity's history, the long struggle from caves to cities, from superstition to science, from isolation to the stars. At every stage, they had faced choices between safety and growth, between comfort and exploration. These younger species, she said finally, what happens to them if we say no? They will be evaluated by other established civilizations, or by us directly, if no suitable mentors are available. The process will continue regardless of humanity's participation. But it might be different if we were involved. Very different. Humanity brings a unique perspective to the process. Your emphasis on individual rights, cultural preservation, and voluntary cooperation is unusual among spacefaring species. Sarah thought about her crew, about the 2 million people on New Marseille who were going about their lives unaware of how close they had come to extinction. She thought about the children who would grow up to explore new worlds and make new discoveries. Did humanity have the right to deny other species the guidance that might help them avoid destruction? If we accept this responsibility, she said, What guarantees do we have that we won't become like other species? That we won't lose ourselves in the role of cosmic judge and jury? Queen Valarath was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried new harmonics that the translator interpreted as something like sadness. There are no guarantees, Commander Chun. The Kithara began much as you are now, idealistic, committed to justice and compassion. Over 8 millennia, they have become more pragmatic, more willing to make difficult choices for the greater good. Whether that represents growth or corruption is a matter of perspective. Sarah studied the Queen's expression, seeing something there that might have been regret. What about your people? How did you begin? We were the first, Queen Valarath replied simply. 50,000 years ago, we achieved interstellar travel and found a galaxy filled with chaos. Species destroying each other, entire civilizations lost to preventable wars, vast stretches of space rendered lifeless by weapons we had never imagined. We chose to impose order. And in doing so, you became what you are now. We became what the galaxy needed us to become. But in recent millennia, some of my people have begun to question whether the costs of that choice were justified. Your quantum disruption allowed us to experience individual doubt for the first time in eons. The experience was unsettling. Sarah could see the weight of ages in the alien queen's posture, the burden of decisions that had shaped galactic civilization for millennia. Is that why you're offering this choice to humanity? Because you're looking for a different approach? Perhaps. Or perhaps because your species has demonstrated that there are alternatives we never considered. The gift you shared with my fleet, it contained concepts we had forgotten. Hope without logical foundation, as I said before. Beauty created for its own sake rather than for survival advantage. Love that transcends genetic programming. The Queen moved to another section of the display, showing what appeared to be the Zephyrian homeworld. It was beautiful in its alien way, but Sarah noticed something troubling about the images. Everything was perfectly ordered, perfectly efficient. There was no chaos, no randomness, no apparent room for the unexpected. We created perfect order, Queen Valarath continued. But in doing so, we may have eliminated the very qualities that make life worth living. Your people offer the possibility of a different path, one that preserves both order and chaos, structure and freedom. Sarah felt the weight of decision pressing down on her. The choice wasn't just about humanity's future. It was about the future of intelligence in the galaxy. The responsibility was staggering, but so was the opportunity. If humanity accepts this role, she said slowly, we would do it our way. Not as conquerors or judges, but as guides and protectors. We would help these younger species find their own paths, not impose our vision on them. That approach has never been attempted on this scale, Queen Valarath warned. It may lead to chaos, to conflicts that could have been prevented through firmer guidance. It might, Sarah agreed. But it might also lead to solutions we never would have discovered through control and domination. Sometimes the best way to help someone grow is to trust them to make their own mistakes. The alien queen tilted her head in that almost familiar gesture. Your choice, Commander. Sarah looked one last time at the display, showing humanity's potential future. She thought about her crew, about the people of Earth, and the colonies, about the vast community of intelligent life spread across the galaxy. She thought about the species that would come after humanity, and the ones that might never get the chance to develop if they weren't given proper guidance. We'll do it, she said, but we'll do it as partners, not masters. And if we ever start to lose sight of what makes us human, I hope someone will have the courage to stop us. Queen Valarath smiled, an expression that transformed her alien features into something almost warm. That, Commander Chun, is precisely why your species may succeed where others have failed. The test was complete, but Sarah realized that in many ways, the real challenge was just beginning. 6 months after humanity's acceptance into the galactic community, Commander Sarah Chun stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned UES Harmony, watching her first test case unfold on the main display. The ship itself was a marvel of human-Zephyrian cooperation, a fusion of Earth's engineering practicality and alien biotechnology that created something entirely new. The Verkari system spread before them like a three-dimensional puzzle waiting to be solved. For planets showed signs of intelligent life, but it was clear that the species inhabiting them were on a collision course that would likely result in mutual extinction within the next 50 years. Status report. Sarah called to her mixed crew of humans and Zephyrians. The integration had been challenging, but both species were learning from each other in ways that surprised even Queen Valorath. The third planet shows increasing military buildup, reported Science Officer Thompson, now sporting cybernetic enhancements that allowed him to interface directly with the ship's hybrid systems. Their orbital defense platforms have tripled in the past year. The fourth planet is responding in kind, added Zektar, a young Zephyrian who had volunteered to serve under human command after experiencing what he called the gift of individual thought. His translation harmonics carried notes of concern that had become familiar to the human crew. Energy signatures suggest they are developing weapons capable of planetary sterilization. Sarah studied the tactical display, noting the positions of the various factions and their technological capabilities. The Verkari were a proud species, tall and graceful with 4 arms and skin that changed color based on their emotional state. They had achieved spaceflight only recently, but their rate of technological advancement was impressive and dangerous. "What's the cultural analysis?" she asked. Lieutenant Rodriguez, now serving as the ship's diplomatic specialist, pulled up files on his workstation. Both planets follow honor-based societies with strong territorial instincts. They've been fighting intermittent wars for over 3 centuries, mostly confined to their respective worlds. But now that both have achieved orbital capability, they're taking their conflict into space, Sarah finished. And with the weapons they're developing, the next war could be their last. The situation was exactly the kind of challenge Queen Valorath had warned her about. Traditional Zephyrian intervention would have been swift and decisive, disable both planets' military capabilities, impose a peace treaty, and monitor them for several generations until their aggressive tendencies were contained or bred out entirely. It was efficient, effective, and completely contrary to everything humanity believed about free will and self-determination. "Commander," Zektar said carefully, "the Zephyrian Dominion has protocols for this exact scenario. We could resolve this conflict within days." "I know," Sarah replied, "but we're not here to impose solutions. We're here to help them find their own way forward, even if that way leads to their destruction." It was the question that had kept Sarah awake for the past 6 months. How do you balance respect for free will with the responsibility to prevent genocide? How do you guide without controlling, teach without dictating? Thompson, have either planet made any attempts to establish diplomatic contact with the other? Negative, ma'am. Their communication networks are completely separate, and there's been no indication that either side wants to negotiate. What if they had a reason to work together? Sarah mused. Something that required cooperation to survive. The crew exchanged glances. It was an approach that had never been tried before. Instead of preventing the conflict, they would give both sides a common enemy to face. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said slowly, "are you suggesting we create a threat?" "Not create," Sarah corrected. "Reveal." She had Thompson bring up the long-range sensors, focusing on the outer edge of the Verkari system. There, hidden among the cometary debris, was exactly what she had hoped to find: evidence of an incoming asteroid that would impact the system's inhabited worlds within 18 months. "It's not large enough to cause extinction-level events," Thompson reported after running the calculations. "But it would cause massive ecological damage to both planets. Millions would die, unless they work together to stop it," Sarah said. 2 planets, for arms per individual, complementary technological strengths. If they can set aside their differences long enough to address a common threat, they might discover that cooperation is more beneficial than conflict. Zektar's skin patterns shifted to colors that indicated deep thoughtfulness. This approach is highly irregular. Traditional intervention protocols would never permit allowing such risk to civilian populations. Which is exactly why we're trying something different, Sarah replied. The question is, how do we make sure they discover the threat in a way that encourages cooperation rather than panic? The next few hours were spent planning what would become known as the Harmony Protocol, a carefully orchestrated series of events designed to guide the Verkari toward a solution without directly imposing one. It was delicate work, requiring precise timing and a deep understanding of the species' psychology. First, they arranged for both planets to detect the incoming asteroid simultaneously, using subtle manipulations of their sensor networks to ensure the discovery appeared natural. Then, they planted carefully crafted evidence suggesting that the asteroid's trajectory had been altered by gravitational anomalies, making it clear that this was not a natural disaster, but a problem requiring advanced engineering to solve. Initial reactions coming in, Rodriguez reported as they monitored communications from both worlds. Planet 3, Vraka Prime, is mobilizing their defense fleet. Planet 4, New Vraka, is doing the same. Are they talking to each other? Not yet. Each planet is treating this as a challenge they need to meet independently. Sarah frowned. Verkari pride was working against them, preventing the cooperation that would be necessary to address the threat effectively. She needed a way to make collaboration seem like the honorable choice rather than an admission of weakness. Thompson, what's the energy output required to deflect that asteroid? Approximately 40% greater than either planet could generate independently, he replied after a moment of calculation. But together they could handle it easily, Sarah finished. Now we just need them to reach that conclusion on their own. The solution came from an unexpected source. Zektar, drawing on his experience with collective consciousness, suggested what he called a shared discovery protocol. Instead of letting them struggle independently until they realize they need help, he explained, we guide them to discover each other's technological capabilities. Once they understand what the other side brings to the solution, cooperation becomes logical rather than desperate. It was elegant in its simplicity. Over the next few weeks, they arranged a series of accidental sensor readings that allowed each planet to observe the other's asteroid deflection efforts. Slowly, carefully, they revealed complementary strengths, Vraka Prime's superior energy generation systems, and New Vraka's advanced trajectory calculation capabilities. Ma'am, we're receiving diplomatic transmissions between the planets, Rodriguez reported with barely contained excitement. They're proposing a joint mission to deflect the asteroid. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Monitor closely, but don't interfere unless they specifically request assistance. This is their solution to find. What followed was a tense 3 weeks of negotiations as two civilizations that had been enemies for centuries attempted to work together on the most important project in their history. There were setbacks, arguments, and moments when it seemed like the talks would collapse entirely. But gradually, the shared threat and the necessity of cooperation began to override generations of mistrust. The joint fleet launches in 6 hours, Thompson announced. Combined crews, integrated technology, unified command structure. I have to admit, Commander, this is not how I expected this mission to end. It's not ended yet, Sarah cautioned. The real test comes after the asteroid is deflected. Will they return to their old conflicts? Or will they find new ways to work together? The answer came sooner than expected. As the Verkari fleets successfully altered the asteroid's trajectory, their combined efforts revealed something none of them had anticipated. The asteroid was rich in rare minerals that could revolutionize their energy production systems. Ma'am, Rodriguez called out, his voice filled with amazement. They're not fighting over mining rights. They're proposing a joint extraction operation with shared benefits. Sarah felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with humanity's role in the solution. The Verkari had discovered something that no amount of external guidance could have taught them. That cooperation was not just more effective in conflict, but more rewarding in ways they had never imagined. Status report from Queen Valorath. Zektar announced, his communication harmonics carrying notes of what could only be described as awe. The Zephyrian Dominion is impressed by this outcome. They are requesting detailed analysis of the Harmony Protocol for potential implementation in other systems. Tell Her Majesty that the protocol is freely available to any species willing to trust in the wisdom of those they seek to guide, Sarah replied. Over the following months, the Verkari situation continued to evolve in ways that surprised everyone involved. The two planets not only maintained their cooperation, but began expanding it to other areas of mutual interest. Cultural exchanges, scientific collaborations, and joint exploration missions replaced centuries of military buildup and territorial disputes. They're calling it the Great Awakening, Rodriguez reported during one of their regular status updates. Both planets are treating the asteroid crisis as the moment their civilization truly began to mature. Sarah nodded, but her attention was already shifting to their next assignment. The success with the Verkari had led to more responsibility, and the Harmony was now being dispatched to a system where 8 different species were locked in a complex web of alliances and conflicts that threatened to destabilize an entire sector. More complicated than the Verkari, Thompson observed as he displayed the tactical situation. Multiple species, different technological levels, competing resource claims. Traditional protocols would require direct intervention on a massive scale. Then, it's a good thing we're not following traditional protocols, Sarah said. She studied the display, already beginning to formulate approaches that might guide the various species toward peaceful resolution of their conflicts. Ma'am, Zektar said quietly, there are those in the Dominion who believe this approach is too risky, that eventually we will encounter a situation where guidance alone will be insufficient, and billions will die because we refuse to impose order. It was a fear that Sarah shared, but she had learned something important from the Verkari experience. Maybe they're right, she admitted. Maybe someday we'll face a choice between our principles and the survival of innocent people. But I'd rather take that risk than become the kind of species that imposes its will on others, no matter how benevolent our intentions. And if we fail? If a species destroys itself because we refuse to intervene decisively? Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering the weight of the question. Then, we'll mourn them, learn from the failure, and do better next time. But we won't abandon our belief that every intelligent species deserves the chance to choose its own path. Zektar's skin patterns shifted to colors that indicated deep respect, mixed with concern. Your species continues to surprise us, Commander. This combination of idealism and pragmatism is unique in our experience. We're still learning too, Sarah replied. Every mission teaches us something new about the balance between helping and controlling, between guidance and interference. The ship's systems chimed with an incoming transmission from Queen Valorath. When the alien monarch's image appeared on the main screen, Sarah was surprised to see that her expression carried something that looked almost like hope. Commander Chun, the Queen said, her harmonics carrying complex overtones that suggested significant news. The Zephyrian Council has been monitoring your progress with great interest. The Harmony Protocol has achieved results that many thought impossible. Thank you, Your Majesty. But I suspect this isn't just a congratulatory call. Queen Valorath's expression grew serious. Indeed, we have a new assignment for you, one that will test the limits of your approach. The hegemony of Keth has issued an ultimatum to 3 neighboring species. Submit to their rule or face extinction. They have the military capability to carry out this threat. Sarah felt her blood run cold. This was the scenario she had been dreading, a situation where diplomatic guidance might not be enough, where the choice between intervention and genocide became stark and immediate. How long do we have? She asked. 72 of your hours, the Queen replied. After that, the hegemony launches its first strike. Commander Chun, this will require more than guidance. Are you prepared to take direct action to prevent mass murder? Sarah looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew, human and Zephyrian working together, united in their commitment to a better way forward. The easy missions were over. Now, they would discover whether the Harmony Protocol could work even when faced with genuine evil. We're on our way, Your Majesty, and we'll find a solution that preserves both peace and freedom, even if we have to create it ourselves. The transmission ended, leaving Sarah and her crew to contemplate their greatest challenge yet. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Humanity's time as observers in galactic affairs was over. They were about to discover whether their idealistic approach to interspecies relations could survive contact with the galaxy's darker realities. The Keth hegemony fleet was a sight that would have struck terror into the hearts of any reasonable species. Massive dreadnoughts hung in space like mechanical predators, their angular hulls bristling with weapons designed for planetary bombardment. Intelligence reports indicated that each ship carried enough firepower to sterilize a world, and there were over 200 of them arranged in perfect battle formations. Commander Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the UES Harmony, studying the tactical display that showed the 3 threatened worlds of the Trilarch system. Peaceful civilizations that had never developed significant military capabilities, they were completely helpless against the approaching threat. 70 hours and counting, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported, his voice tight with the tension that had gripped the crew since receiving their orders. The Hegemony Advanced Fleet has already begun targeting sensor sweeps of the outer planets. Sarah had spent the journey to the Trilarch system in intensive planning sessions with her mixed human-Zephyrian crew, trying to find some approach that could stop genocide without resorting to the kind of overwhelming force that would make them no different from the aggressors they opposed. Status on the diplomatic initiatives? She asked. All 3 targeted species have attempted to open negotiations with the hegemony, Science Officer Thompson replied. The Keth response was uniform across all channels. Unconditional surrender or total annihilation. No counteroffers, no discussion of terms, no recognition of sovereignty. Zektar, whose skin patterns had been shifting through agitated color for the past day, looked up from his station. Commander, this is exactly the scenario that traditional protocols were designed to handle. The Zephyrian fleet could be here within 6 hours and eliminate the hegemony threat entirely. Eliminating 3,000 Keth warriors and crew members in the process, Sarah pointed out. What does that make us better than them? Because we would be saving 3 entire civilizations, Zektar replied, his harmonics carrying the kind of logical certainty that made Zephyrian decision-making so efficient. The mathematics of survival are clear. Sarah understood the logic, even sympathized with it. But mathematics didn't account for the deeper principles that humanity brought to galactic politics. Every species, even aggressive ones like the Keth, deserved a chance to choose a better path. What do we know about Keth society? She asked Thompson. Highly militaristic, based on conquest and territorial expansion. They've absorbed 17 smaller civilizations over the past 3 centuries, usually by offering the same ultimatum they've given the Trilarch species. What makes this situation different is that the 3 target worlds are under galactic protection protocols, meaning the Zephyrian Dominion is legally obligated to intervene if we can't resolve this diplomatically, Sarah said. It was the trap she'd been trying to avoid, a situation where failure to find a peaceful solution would result in the very kind of overwhelming intervention that the Harmony Protocol was designed to replace. Ma'am, Rodriguez said suddenly, I'm picking up internal communications from the Hegemony fleet. The Universal Translator is having some trouble with their military codes, but I think they're arguing about something. Sarah moved to his station. Put it through the speakers, best translation you can manage. The bridge filled with harsh, guttural voices that the computer struggled to interpret. The Keth language seemed to consist largely of aggressive growls and militant declarations, but gradually patterns began to emerge. Unprecedented interference by the Dominion. Never faced organized resistance on this scale. High Commander Valoric demands absolute compliance with expansion directives. Rumors of new alliance structures. 3 target species have requested protectorate status. Sarah felt a spark of inspiration. Rodriguez, can you give me more details on those protectorate requests? Working on it, ma'am. His fingers flew over his console, pulling up diplomatic files that the ship's intelligence network had acquired from various sources. Here it is. All three Trilarch civilizations have formally requested emergency protectorate status under the Galactic Covenant. If granted, any attack on them would constitute an act of war against the entire galactic community. When were those requests filed? 48 hours ago. But they haven't been processed yet. The Galactic Council requires unanimous consent for emergency protectorate status, and that usually takes months to achieve. Sarah stared at the tactical display, her mind racing through possibilities. The Keth were aggressive expansionists, but they weren't suicidal. If they believed that attacking the Trilarch worlds would result in war with every advanced civilization in the galaxy, they might reconsider their ultimatum. Thompson, I need you to run a simulation. What would happen if the Galactic Council suddenly approved those protectorate requests? Ma'am, that's impossible. The political complexities alone would require. Just run the simulation, Sarah interrupted. Assume the impossible happened. Thompson worked in silence for several minutes, his enhanced neural interface allowing him to process vast amounts of political and military data. When he looked up, his expression was thoughtful. If the protectorate status was approved, the Keth would be facing potential conflict with over 40 spacefaring civilizations, including several that rival their own military capabilities. Based on their historical behavior patterns, there's an 87% probability they would withdraw rather than risk such overwhelming opposition. And what would it take to make the Galactic Council approve the requests unanimously? A miracle, Thompson replied honestly. Too many competing interests, too much bureaucracy. The fastest emergency protectorate approval in galactic history took 6 weeks. Sarah smiled, an expression that had become familiar to her crew when she was about to attempt something that looked impossible. Then, we'll just have to make our own miracle. What followed was the most complex diplomatic operation in human history. Using the Harmony's advanced communication systems, Sarah opened simultaneous channels to every member of the Galactic Council. The ship's Zephyrian crew members proved invaluable in navigating the complex protocols and cultural sensitivities required to speak with dozens of different species. Honorable representatives, Sarah began, her words being translated into hundreds of different languages and communication formats. I am Commander Sarah Chun of the United Earth Fleet, speaking on behalf of the Trilarch Protectorate requests. We have less than 70 hours to prevent a genocide that would set a precedent for lawlessness throughout the galaxy. The responses came back in a flood of different formats: harmonic frequencies, biochemical signals, electromagnetic pulses, and traditional audio transmissions. The ship's computers worked frantically to sort and translate the incoming data. The Altarian collective expresses concern about the precedent of emergency approvals, Thompson reported. The Centauri Federation wants guarantees that this won't obligate them to military action. The Crystal Singers are asking about the philosophical implications of force protection. Sarah had expected resistance, but she had also prepared for it. Rodriguez, transmit the cultural package we prepared. Full documentation of everything the Trilarch civilizations have contributed to galactic knowledge and art. Make sure every council member understands exactly what we're about to lose. The Trilarch species were remarkable in their own way. While not militarily advanced, they had made significant contributions to galactic culture, mathematical theorems that had revolutionized engineering, artistic forms that had influenced dozens of other species, and scientific discoveries that had practical applications across multiple star systems. Thompson, follow up with the economic analysis. Show them the cost of reconstructing Trilarch contributions if they're lost to genocide. It was a calculated appeal to both emotion and pragmatism, designed to make the council members understand that the Trilarch worlds represented more than just abstract moral principles. They were valuable assets to galactic civilization. The responses began shifting as the full impact of the information became clear. Species that had initially expressed skepticism about emergency protectorate status started reconsidering their positions. The Andorian Assembly is indicating qualified support, Rodriguez reported. The Vegan Trade Confederation wants assurances about economic impacts, but they're not objecting to the principle. How many votes do we have? Sarah asked. Thompson consulted his running tally of council responses. 37 confirmed yes, 15 confirmed no, 23 undecided. We need unanimous consent, which means we need to flip all the no votes and convince all the undecided. Sarah studied the list of holdout species, looking for patterns in their objections. Most fell into two categories: those who were concerned about setting precedents for hasty decision-making, and those who didn't want to risk military confrontation with the Keth hegemony. Can we address the precedent concerns with procedural modifications? She asked. Possibly, Zektar replied, his patterns shifting to colors that indicated deep concentration. If we frame this not as an emergency approval, but as a clarification of existing protectorate eligibility, it might satisfy those concerns. And the military concerns? That's more complicated. Several species have had territorial disputes with the Keth in the past. They're worried that this could escalate into a broader conflict. Sarah nodded, then activated the General Council channel again. Honored representatives, I want to address the concerns about military escalation. The purpose of protectorate status is to prevent conflict, not cause it. The Keth hegemony has historically avoided confrontations when faced with overwhelming opposition. By standing together now, we eliminate the need for military action later. She paused, letting that sink in before continuing. But more importantly, this decision isn't just about the Trilarch worlds. It's about what kind of galaxy we want to live in. Do we want a galaxy where aggressive expansion is rewarded, where peaceful civilizations live in constant fear of conquest? Or do we want a galaxy where cooperation and mutual support make war unprofitable and unnecessary? The debate that followed was intense and sometimes heated, with species arguing across vast differences in culture, philosophy, and political structure. But gradually, Sarah began to see shifts in the positions of key holdout civilizations. The Rigelian Empire is changing their vote to yes, Thompson reported with barely controlled excitement. The Procyon Alliance is indicating support with minor procedural modifications. How long until the Keth ultimatum expires? Sarah asked. 37 hours, Rodriguez replied. The vote was going to be close. Sarah could see that several species were still genuinely undecided, weighing complex political calculations against moral imperatives. She needed something more to push them over the edge. Ma'am, Zektar said suddenly, I'm receiving a priority transmission from Queen Valarath. She's requesting a private channel. Sarah nodded, and the alien queen's familiar form appeared on the bridge's secondary display. But instead of her usual composed demeanor, Valarath looked genuinely concerned. Commander Chun, the queen said without preamble, what you are attempting is unprecedented. Even if you succeed in gaining council approval, you will have fundamentally changed the nature of galactic governance. Are you prepared for the consequences of such a transformation? Your Majesty, with respect, the current system is failing. Aggressive species like the Keth operate with impunity because they know the galactic community won't act quickly enough to stop them. If we can't defend peaceful civilizations when they're threatened, then what purpose does the galactic community serve? Queen Valarath was silent for a moment, her dark eyes reflecting thoughts that Sarah couldn't begin to interpret. You are asking the galaxy to make decisions based on principle rather than careful calculation. This could lead to conflicts that traditional diplomacy might have avoided. Or it could lead to a galaxy where conflicts become unnecessary because the cost of aggression is too high, Sarah replied. Your Majesty, the Zephyrian Dominion has maintained order for 50,000 years through strength and careful management. But humanity brings a different approach. We believe that consensus and voluntary cooperation are stronger than imposed order. And if you are wrong? if this approach leads to chaos and war. Sarah looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew, human and alien, working together toward a common goal. Then, we'll face those consequences together, as partners rather than subjects. But I believe we're right, Your Majesty. I believe the galaxy is ready for a different kind of leadership. Queen Valorath nodded slowly. Very well, Commander. The Zephyrian Dominion will support your proposal. But understand that this support comes with a condition. If this new approach fails catastrophically, humanity will bear responsibility for the consequences. The Queen's endorsement proved to be the turning point. Species that had been wavering suddenly found their concerns addressed by the implicit backing of the galaxy's most powerful civilization. One by one, the holdout votes began changing to yes. Unanimous consent achieved. Thompson announced with something approaching awe in his voice. The Trilarch Protectorate requests have been approved. Sarah felt a surge of relief and pride, but she knew the hardest part was still ahead. Rodriguez, open a channel to the Keth hegemony fleet. The main screen flickered, and suddenly, Sarah found herself face-to-face with High Commander Valoric of the Keth hegemony. The alien was imposing in the way that only a career warrior could be, scarred, battle-hardened, and radiating an aura of barely controlled violence. His species had evolved from predatory pack hunters, and it showed in every line of his angular face. Human Commander, Valoric growled, his voice carrying the kind of casual contempt that suggested he viewed all non-Keth as inferior. You presume to interfere with hegemony expansion protocols. High Commander, Sarah replied calmly. I'm here to inform you that the 3 Trilarch worlds have been granted emergency protectorate status by unanimous vote of the Galactic Council. Any attack on those worlds will be considered an act of war against the entire galactic community. Valoric's expression shifted from contempt to calculation. Sarah could see the warrior's mind working, assessing odds and calculating risks. The Keth were aggressive, but they had survived for centuries by knowing when to fight and when to withdraw. You bluff, human. The Galactic Council has never acted with such speed on any matter. Thompson, transmit the official council documentation, Sarah ordered. Within seconds, the Keth commander's displays were filled with the formal protectorate declarations, bearing the official seals of 75 different civilizations. Valoric studied the documents, his expression growing darker with each passing moment. Even so, he said finally, the hegemony does not retreat from rightful expansion. These worlds are within our designated territory. No, High Commander, they're not. Sarah had anticipated this argument. Under the Galactic Territorial Accords, no species can claim territory inhabited by other intelligent beings without their consent. The Trilarch civilizations never agreed to Keth sovereignty. They will agree when faced with the alternative. They already have faced the alternative, and they chose freedom over submission. That choice is now backed by the full authority of the galactic community. The tension on the bridge was palpable as the 2 commanders stared at each other across the vast distances of space. Sarah could feel her crew holding their collective breath, waiting to see whether diplomacy would triumph or whether the galaxy was about to witness its first major war in over 1,000 years. Valoric was silent for a long time, his predatory eyes weighing options that only he could see. Finally, he spoke, his voice carrying the grudging respect of one professional soldier for another. You have won this engagement, human commander, but understand that the hegemony remembers such interference. We will find other expansion opportunities, ones not protected by your political maneuvering. High Commander, Sarah said quietly, the galaxy is changing. The old ways of conquest and forced expansion are ending. There are better paths forward, paths that offer growth and prosperity without the costs of eternal warfare. The hegemony could be part of that future if you choose to be. Valoric's laugh was harsh and bitter. You speak of change as if it were a good thing. The Keth have survived for 3,000 years by understanding the fundamental truth of existence. The strong take what they need, and the weak submit or die. Your soft philosophies will not change that reality. Maybe not, Sarah admitted. But they might offer your people something they've never had before. The chance to be remembered for creation rather than destruction, for what they built rather than what they conquered. The Keth commander studied her for another long moment, then abruptly cut the transmission. The bridge fell silent as everyone processed what had just happened. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said finally, "the hegemony fleet is beginning to withdraw from the Trilarch system." Sarah felt the tension leave her shoulders as the tactical display showed the massive Keth dreadnoughts slowly changing course. They had done it. Prevented genocide without firing a shot, saved 3 civilizations without destroying another. "Status report on the Trilarch worlds," she ordered. Celebrations breaking out on all 3 planets. Thompson reported with a grin. "They're transmitting gratitude messages on all frequencies. One of them is apparently composing a song cycle about today's events." "And the Galactic Council?" "Mixed reactions," Zektar replied, his patterns showing colors that indicated complex emotions. "Many species are pleased with the outcome, but several are expressing concern about the precedent we've set. They're worried about the implications of rapid council action." Sarah nodded. She had expected this reaction. Change always created uncertainty, even when that change was positive. "We'll address those concerns as they arise. Right now, I want to focus on what we've accomplished." "Ma'am," Rodriguez said, "incoming transmission from Queen Valarath." The alien queen appeared on the main screen, but her expression was different from any Sarah had seen before. There was something that might have been pride in those dark eyes, along with what looked like genuine satisfaction. "Commander Chun," Queen Valarath said, "you have achieved something remarkable today. Not just the preservation of 3 civilizations, but the demonstration of a new model for galactic governance. The implications of this success will be felt for generations." "Thank you, Your Majesty. But this was only possible because of the cooperation we've built between our species. The Harmony Protocol works because it combines human idealism with Zephyrian wisdom." "Indeed. And that combination has produced results that neither of our species could have achieved alone." The Queen paused, then continued with words that would reshape galactic politics. "The Zephyrian Dominion formally requests that humanity take the lead in developing new protocols for galactic crisis intervention. You have proven that there are alternatives to the traditional methods of order maintenance." Sarah felt the weight of history settling on her shoulders. What had begun as a desperate gamble to save her species from extinction had evolved into something far greater. A fundamental transformation of how intelligent civilizations interacted with each other. "We accept that responsibility, Your Majesty. But we want to do it as partners with all willing species, not as leaders imposing our will on others." Queen Valarath smiled, that expression that had once seemed alien but now felt familiar and warm. "That attitude, Commander Chun, is precisely why humanity is suited for this role. You seek to lead by example rather than by force, to guide by consensus rather than by decree." The transmission ended, leaving Sarah and her crew to contemplate the magnitude of what had just occurred. In a single day, they had prevented a war, saved 3 civilizations, and established humanity as a major voice in galactic affairs. "Ma'am," Thompson said quietly, "sensors are detecting massive celebration gatherings on all 3 Trilarch worlds. They're calling today Liberation Day and declaring it a permanent holiday." Sarah moved to the observation deck, looking out at the stars that no longer seemed cold and distant but filled with possibility. Somewhere out there, billions of beings were going about their lives, most of them unaware of how close they had come to witnessing the galaxy's descent into chaos and fear. Instead, they would wake tomorrow in a galaxy where cooperation had triumphed over conquest, where wisdom had overcome brute force, with a future held promise instead of merely survival. It was not the end of challenges. Sarah knew that other tests would come, other crises that would require new solutions and fresh approaches. But humanity had proven something important to themselves and to the galaxy, that there were always alternatives to violence, always paths to solutions that preserved both dignity and life. As the Harmonies set course for Earth, carrying news of humanity's new role in galactic affairs, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. It had begun with a desperate gamble in the face of overwhelming odds, and it had become something that would echo through the centuries. Proof that the universe was vast enough to accommodate hope, wisdom, and the dream of a better tomorrow. The test was complete, but the real work was just beginning.